So when we were thinking through kind of what the agenda would be, we thought maybe talking a little bit and getting kind of real about career and the career path and the kind of different places that you can go in a delivery career would be interesting. So what we're going to do as a panel, we've done a little bit of prep work. We're each going to talk for about 2 or 3 minutes about our own career paths, so hopefully you all can kind of relate to kind of what we've been through. And then we're going to open it up to some questions, whether they're questions from me, I'm kind of moderate some questions, but also open to you all. And I'll say when we're asking for you to, if you have questions, feel free to shout out because it's a little hard to see, especially up this way because the lights are bright. But why don't we get started? Grab my questions here. Paul is going to start and tell us kind of about his career path, where he started and kind of where he is now.
Okay, afternoon everyone. So I started my career after leaving Keele University. I'm doing a degree in geographical information systems. I didn't go to university to do anything in tech. I did geography and American studies. So changed literally overnight into the tech side. Whilst I was there, I actually then started doing a part-time job at Halfords, which led me into a more permanent role, being cycle supervisor, opening new stores, and part of that transition was actually going out and training people across the stores and doing that work. So there was a lot of project management work around there. Now my career break came there, because my career at that point in time was, I love cycling, this place is for me, and my career break was when I went to the HR team and said, what's my next steps? And their response was, just wait. And I thought, actually, I'm out at that point. So at that point, I moved over to the newspapers. I worked on a regional newspaper. That's where I did use my geographical information system skills. I was then involved in rolling out, and I'll come on to this later this afternoon, rolling out the scheduling of newspapers. And from that point into solving the Millennium Bug. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that bug, which is around, a non-existent one. Moved into project management as part in the Daily Mail group. The regional newspaper I worked for was actually part of the Daily Mail group, so it was just a movement physically into a different location. And from there, I moved into a company called Red Eye. Some of you may know about them. They are an agency, well, not an agency as such, but they do marketing. And I spent the 5 years there introducing the development teams into Scrum and how to best work. At which point, after my 5 years there, I felt I'd done my job. I couldn't add any more value to the business, so I left and moved to Booking Go.
Thank you. Vicky.
So I started off in my bedroom. So before I'd even left school, I was a bit of a nerd. Spent the summer holidays in my bedroom and I used to design logos. There was a website called 99 Designs, formerly SitePoint. We spent a lot of time on there and fiddle around with Photoshop. Ended up starting to make some money off it, so I thought, I'm quite good at this, I might do this as my career. So I carried on with that for a few years, did a degree in digital media, and then got my first agency job, which was a business that used to build websites for apartment blocks. So I dabbled with the development side of things as well, because that was a natural progression. And I spent a few years as designer and developer. And I moved around to a couple of agencies. So I moved to Sutton Silver in Chester, and then I moved over to Clicky. And Clicky is where my progression really started to happen. It started off as a small agency. There was 6 of us at the time. And by the time I left, there was 40 of us, and the web team in particular grew and grew and grew. So over time, I grew that business and became the lead creative there, but also we didn't have project managers at the time, which was chaos, absolute chaos. So I kind of stepped in as a bit of a team lead and helped coordinate the design and development of projects as well as that client-facing role. Eventually it got to the point where I was doing a lot and I just needed a clean break, some fresh projects, so I moved over to Blue Leaf as a UX designer, so back to the role that I always thought I wanted to do. Now it turns out I was a bit bossy. I started project managing the project managers because my role previous was about coordination and managing as well as doing the creative side. So after a few talks from a really supportive line manager and from the CEO directly as well, I actually transitioned into that project management role. which was absolutely scary, and at the time I did wonder, am I making the right decision? Turns out I did. I kind of took to it like a duck to water, did well for a few years. As the culture of Blue Leaf changed and started to take on a different approach to e-commerce development, took on a new project, I felt that type of project management wasn't for me, so I moved over to Prodo for a year. I don't regret moving to Prodo, but what was interesting for me is that that's where I really started to understand the culture of businesses and what worked for me and what didn't. Prodo are a fantastic company, but the culture didn't work for me as a person, and as a team manager and as a project manager. So I then moved to CPL Online and have lived happily ever after that as a senior project manager.
So yeah, me next. So I'm going to start off a little bit before going to uni, but did anyone do that horrible careers test when you're about sort of 15 or 16 at school, where you fill in loads of answers and it kicks out some suggested careers for you? Well, I got gardener and prison officer. I told my friend this recently, and she said, "Oh, you'd make a great prison officer." I don't know whether to be insulted or not. But anyway, so I didn't know what to do. I liked English at A-level, so I did English at uni. After uni, I didn't know what to do, so I decided to try and get a job, save some money, go travelling. Worked in phone sales, wasn't very good at that because I was a bit too honest and told people to go elsewhere if they could get a better deal, which didn't go down too well. I did an MA, again not really knowing what I wanted to do in the future, so basically I was faffing around for quite a few years. Out of uni, I applied for lots and lots of jobs and didn't get anything for quite a while until I landed the job of account executive, so sort of starting off at the bottom rung of the ladder at a company called Intermarketing, which was mainly direct marketing, so they sort of mail packs where you get like a free gift for buying something. I was working a lot on them. So I worked my way up to account manager there. They didn't recognise the distinction between project managers and account managers at that time, so it was a hybrid role. But I got kind of a bit fed up with those direct mail packs, and I started to get much more interested in digital. So I went to Sentinel, which was a digital agency, and again I was an account manager. So it was this hybrid role between project and account management. I wanted a promotion, so I actually moved because of getting this promotion, but I only worked at Corping for about 10 months because it was largely very bitty jobs. It wasn't very sort of long project based. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So then I finally found my calling as a project manager and went to a company called Numico, who recognised that distinction between project management and account management. And whilst I was there, I started to get into the sort of digital project management community. Started speaking at DPM UK. I stalked Brett and Sam at their very first workshop. I basically bought a ticket to it before they even advertised it. I was the very first person, just because I was Googling digital project management workshops. This came up, I bought a ticket, and they were like, "Who is this stalker?"
One ticket sold.
Yeah, one ticket sold, just when we haven't even advertised it. But yeah, so I was at an agency. I didn't really know what was the next step in my career, but I kind of wanted to branch out a bit, and that's when I moved down to London and worked in an agency called Tribal for 3 years. So I was a global senior project manager there. The reason I moved on from there, it was about having a bad manager. I was getting blocked from having a promotion, and I felt like I just wanted, and I'll probably talk about this a bit more later, a bit more flexibility. So I became freelance, and then kind of promoted myself over the last 2 years or so, and now I'm a digital program director, and it gives me kind of flexibility to do things like speaking. I work on the digitalprojectmanager.com website on the expert panel there, so it's great to sort of get involved in the community stuff as well.
Okay, so first up, I graduated from uni quite late, 27. I didn't put that emoji on, like Brett did. Yeah, cheers, buddy. Then it took me a long time to get my first job. Got my first job in a very small agency as really a website administrator. So I'd done my degree. Again, we'll probably talk about that education a bit later. But I was essentially, before this slide, I could have had another one with a lot of, I guess you could say, manual labour type jobs. So I was just absolutely amazed that I was sitting down, working in a CMS, doing what I enjoyed for a job. That took that novelty wore off, and eventually I realised I was going to teach myself something else, so I went into a bit of front-end engineering. And then a bit like Vicky, I'm going to not say bossy, I got organised. I essentially opened my big mouth and ended up managing projects as well as coding, then very slowly over the time was managing projects, also account managing, as you do at small companies. From there I went on to another place called, an agency called Rawnet. That's really where I was. That's where I spent my entire time as a web project manager, managing all sorts of stuff there. It was a good time. But that's also where I first started writing. So very similar to Natasha's sort of talking. That's where I kind of started to branch out a little bit and wrote about what I was doing. Didn't really think much would happen, and yet here I am. From that, I went on to bigger companies. Everything was small so far. The next company volume was 200 people, still agency, but it really opened my eyes. So the title there was technology analyst, which I didn't really know what it meant. Essentially, it was a weird mix of sort of PM stroke business analyst. It was kind of strange, but it still was the same skills essentially. And that's around about that time was when I really started writing a lot. So not just on my own site, but for other people as well. And next up was Ventro, which was a online dating company. Yeah, I've seen some things. I mean, you think you've seen some things in this job, I've seen some things in this job, that particular company. That was also the time that saw Sue stalked us, which was interesting, and we did the first workshop where I first met Brett. And also, where I first, around about the same time, I started doing public speaking. So again, all very nicely linking up together. And then where I am now is Marks & Spencer as an engineering manager, which is a bit of a pivot, but that's what we'll talk about.
So I'm going to start mine by saying, wow, look at how much more there is on mine. It's a little embarrassing to me. And I'll tell you that it took me some time to figure out, so let me share my journey. I started actually at St. Joseph's University back in Philadelphia as a biology major, and really almost failed out of college. Switched my major to what I felt I was more suited to, which was English and Fine Arts, very different. Spent a semester in London, at University of London. Out of school, looking for a job, I told the career counselor that I wanted to be a writer or an editor, and they handed me a giant white book of possible jobs I could get, which was not helpful. So I ended up finding my first job at a startup through Monster.com, and I basically badgered them until they hired me. And that's where I learned everything about the web. I was doing everything from Photoshop to producing videos, motion capture, flash animations, everything you name it, nothing that I'd ever known about prior to that point in my life. So that's really where my knowledge of the web started. There's a big X there because I was laid off or made redundant. The company went up to, I was the 7th person hired, went up to 70, and then started cutting people. And I finally said to my boss, at 12 people, I was like, I really just want to be fired now. Like, can you let me go? Because it was too much stress. So I moved back home. That was right outside of New York City. I moved back home in with my parents. I was about 23 at that time. Took any job I could get. Took a horrible publishing job. Stayed there for about 6 weeks and got a job back at my university fundraising, which was also completely awful. It was not what I was good at. I wasn't good at taking people out for lunches and then asking them for thousands of dollars. It just was not me. It would never be me. Moved on there and took a job at another university in Philadelphia as an assistant director of communications. That's where I was kind of a webmaster, but also working on print publications, but really at the same time, managing designers, managing developers, and really kind of delivering. In that job, I was the PM for a big capital campaign, and I went to a football game with the owner of the agency who was working on that campaign, and that's where he offered me a job. And a week later, I doubled my salary just from going from higher ed into an agency. And that's where things really started to change for me. That was a really pivotal moment, and it happened on the ground floor of a giant football stadium, which was cool for me. So I worked there for about 3.5 years. There was any agency, up and down. It was a really rough patch. I went away one time. They told me they were going to lay people off. I came back and nobody was laid off. And then 6 months later, they tried to cut me to part-time. And I said, this is your worst decision. I'm going to leave if you don't keep me at full-time. And they put me back to full-time, which is amazing. Then I was recruited to Razorfish. So Razorfish is a big global digital agency. And it was then where I was introduced to the role of a PM, and I honestly had to ask the recruiter 3 times what a project manager was, because I didn't know what it was. when I worked there, I learned so much. It was very formal, very much about spreadsheets and numbers, and I didn't like that because I liked working with clients. So then I moved back to a smaller agency at HappyCog. That's where I founded the Digital Project Management, Digital PM Summit. And that was because that was an agency where people were pushed to put themselves out there and do more writing and speaking. And that's when I started my blog, it's when I started writing, it's when I met Sam. We kind of put together a panel entry for South by Southwest that got accepted, but you didn't come because they only let us have 2 people and they made me rejected someone else. So I rejected Sam, then we did the workshop here and Sue stopped us. Then after that, things got rough. Again, at an agency, things get rough, right? I was the VP of project management. I hired a team of 6 people. I was really proud of that. I felt really accomplished by that. And then things went downhill and I had to fire people. I had to fire people who were really close to me and were really talented and good at what they did. And I had to fire people that I didn't agree with firing. I thought other people should stay. So I quit because I was vetoed. And I said, this is not the place for me. I gave them 3 months. In that 3 months, I interviewed a little bit, and then I decided to go on my own. And I did consulting and coaching, and I wrote my book, and started a podcast, and then I was recruited by Team GAN. I'd been kind of freelancing with them for a while, and they just kind of hit me at the right moment, and I went there, and now I'm the director of education. So I told everybody to spend 3 minutes, and I spent the most time. So. Does anybody have any follow-up questions on any of this before we jump in to some general Q&A?
There's one here.
Okay, great.
When all of you have transitioned from one role into the next role, how did you know what job titles to look for? Were you working with recruiters or were you looking at companies specifically? What made you think to look at different job titles?
For me, I searched for about 20, 30, some keywords and pairings. I had more safe searches and more job sites than just whatever came up. It meant sifting through a lot of stuff that wasn't really for me, but it meant I caught some of that stuff that didn't have the right, like that technology analyst role. That was actually a really interesting role, just what I wanted at the time. But I wasn't searching for that title, obviously. So it's keywords within the CVs. It was a splattergun approach for me personally.
I think for me, my main point where I was actually not really understanding where to go next was when I was an account manager, because there wasn't a lot of this kind of split at the time between account managers and project managers. But I find reading around a lot, researching a lot, really helped me there to actually distinguish, project management is something I want to do, it's about delivery, I don't really want to do the account management side of it, and that made me focus on an agency which had that split. And even now, I find there's a lot of different job titles out there, which can be a bit confusing, especially in our kind of arena. So you've got delivery leads, scrum masters, producers, product managers, project managers. But I've spent quite a lot of time trying to understand the differences between the roles and see where I kind of fit, I guess.
I think what I realised as well when I was doing a lot of job searching is that a project manager in one agency is very different to a project manager in another agency. So then I started to look at the culture of the businesses and what those specific roles are about, not necessarily the titles and what it says on the surface level, but actually the culture within the business. And when I made that shift, that actually made me find the role and the place where I was meant to be, where I feel like I'm at home. And to me, that's more important than the label or the job title that I've got. Does that make sense?
So for me, I'll just add to that I still keep job searches open, even though I'm completely happy. I'll join sites and just search for keywords. Operations is a big one for me because I know that I'm in a point in my career where I don't want to go back to being a project manager just because I moved on from being a PM to managing PMs. So program director would be another one. So for me, it's more about looking at other ways that I can branch out, and I think also just looking at companies culture and things like that, which I think draws me in more than anything else at this point. I think a question that I have for everyone is kind of around the qualities of good delivery and leadership. What are the things that you think you possess or maybe have helped you or even you've looked for in other people when hiring in your career or in positions like this? What are the qualities of good leadership or management?
Should I kick off? Okay, that's fine. So for me, and I can say I've really struggled with this and I work on really hard with the communication stuff. We say it over and over again, that communication is so key, but yeah, that is the real qualities. So a win which I had recently was I was working with a team, the leadership team was saying this team are not doing very well at all. I went in, I put some really basic communications and the team did nothing different. Now this team are a super team, one of the best teams in the company. What happened? Nothing, it was just communication of what they were doing. So yeah, that would be one of my key ones.
For me, it's about passion and fire in the belly. So when I'm interviewing, we start off our interviews by saying, spend 5 minutes and tell me something that you're passionate about. And I get more out of those 5 minutes where they're talking about something they're excited about than any of the project management questions or any of the Gantt charts they can show me or any project plans or anything. It's about having that passion and drive for me that really gets me excited, because they're the people that are going to be driving the developers and pushing through these projects and keeping the clients up to date. And if they haven't got that fire in the belly and the passion, then it's already a starting point that project may not be successful. So it starts off with the project manager and the passion.
Are those passions work related, or are they sometimes
anything at all? I've had ones where they've talked about architecture for about 10 minutes, and afterwards I really wanted to go see these buildings. I was like, whoa! And it's just having that passion and playing. Once you can start seeing that in someone's eyes, it really makes that difference.
So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. It's like Rachel has a question here.
Cool. One question I have, and I suppose I'm the kind of person that you're not meant to look at other people and like everyone's success is different, and I think it ties into that point from the talk just before from Natasha, which I think is to do with that idea of loyalty and whether you stay with a company or bad management, that sort of thing. As employers, or if you're looking at people, how much do you judge length of service? Because in my mind, I've kind of got a bit of a growth mindset and I move when I can't grow, and I feel like I can justify it. But I'd be curious from an employer's point of view on the panel here, like how would you look at length of service when you're looking at candidates?
Well, for me, I think it just depends. It doesn't matter about the length of time, but it depends if there's a good reason for moving. I recently did an interview where I asked the person why, you keep working at these places. It was a freelancer, but you keep working at these places for quite a short time. Why is that? Is that the contract length, etc.? And he said, I get bored easily. And I was like, not the best answer to give. So yeah, if there's a good reason behind it, I don't see that as a problem necessarily.
Pretty much the same. I mean, I didn't used to ask why. I had to learn to ask why, because I used to take, I think what most people do if we do something a lot, the face value of it. But the question why, sometimes I'm massively surprised. It can be life conditions, it can be so many different things. But there's the flip side, where people are somewhere for a long time, and you need to be able to work out, quite honestly, if they're coasting or hiding, or if they're actually really, they just happen to have been engaged in that company for whatever, 7, 8, 10 years sometimes. Talking to them is the only, I mean, the passion thing, even if I don't ask it, I'm looking for that. If someone's been at a company 10 years in the same role, but they love it, and then, you get a vibe off it, I don't have a problem with that. And so it's digging in to see what the perhaps hidden truth is.
Yeah, I think just focus on having a good response for that question, because it will come up. But I also agree that I think it's a dated question, especially in tech. I think we can move around as much as we want and pick up knowledge and skills from so many different people and places.
Yeah, I was going to add, I've got the converse to that, or the direct opposite. I was in the same organisation for 18 years. So when I went out to the marketplace, I was like, hang on, we're going to look at this and go, he hasn't done anything, he hasn't been anywhere. So yeah, I think it can work both ways.
Let's talk about education and training. I'll hit you right after this, okay? since I can't see anything. Education and training. So we all talked about our college degrees, right? And they pretty much didn't relate to what we're doing now, which is fine. It's still a foundation, I think, of education. What we didn't talk about or mention is certifications and trainings within your sort of professional development. Curious for the room, and I think this was already asked today, so I apologize, but how many of you have a PMP or an Agile Scrum certification, something like that? So a good number of people. How about panelists? What kinds of trainings have you done that you think have been really helpful for your career development?
I did Prince 2, and I only actually did this last year, and partly because I've got apprentices on my team who are all doing their APM exams, and they're talking about all this terminology, and I was like, oh my god, I'm not even qualified for my job, which was a bit of a probably odd thing to think about, but we decided to put me on a Prince 2 course just so that we've got that overall grounding. Now, what was interesting for me is it didn't really help me much in the day-to-day. For me, it was just education about a framework. It didn't teach me how to facilitate an issue, how to sort out when your client's angry, how to coax that developer into staying 10 minutes late to get that button sorted so we can actually go live. But what it did give me is the context from a business point of view. So the business I work in, we work with large corporates who do have governance processes, who do have to write business cases for the work that we do. So for me, what I did gain from it is understanding that relationship and the steps that they're going through from a large corporate to help line up how we deliver for them and making sure that we're hitting their KPIs and their almost formal project management boxes, if that makes sense.
Well, I started out in 2005 as I went through my workshop yesterday, but back then I don't think there was a really proper defined role for a DPM, and there weren't that many certifications around specifically for DPM either, so I've kind of gone through my career not really doing any certs or formal training. I did take a Scrum Master qualification a few years ago. It kind of ticks a box, I think, but again, like I said, it's about frameworks and learning kind of methodologies. Maybe there's a lot of that about, and I do think they are useful in some senses. So yeah, you can learn about a framework. It is a tick box for some jobs. Some jobs do ask for certain qualifications, but I don't think, definitely don't think it's a necessity to get ahead.
I think when it comes to that, again, Natasha mentioned in the previous talk about technical skills versus the undefined skills that are perhaps as important, if not more. When a job is requesting a certification, to me, and validated by the years thinking it and seeing it, I think that unless it's something governmental or public sector or some kind of legal or some reason to have it, if a job spec requires Prince 2 or certified product owner, I just take it with a pinch of salt, because enough of us have done them to realise exactly what we've all experienced. They're great foundations. So I would send, I've trained PMs, and I would send someone who's got no concept of PM, maybe from a different part of the organisation, just trying to get them going. They've got some of the kind of natural skills. Send them on a Prince 2 course or foundation. Now they come away, they just understand the basics. Exactly as you say, it doesn't always help day to day. In fact, it rarely helps, but they suddenly have a different way of looking at things and understanding. But I was a certified Scrum product owner. It took 6 hours, and I couldn't do anything the next day. It was, it ticks a box, but for me, it's. I'm not sure it's worth ticking these days, actually, if I'm to be honest.
Yeah, it's a question that I often am asked when I'm doing things like this. Like, are certifications worth it? And I think it's such a controversial question, and I think people want me to say no. But I think education is always important. I think if you're not learning while you're working and growing, whether that be through a training or even just through sitting down with coworkers, I think you're not doing it right. So I'm curious to know how you all learned digital, though, specifically, because I think that is a thing that people in all delivery roles struggle with, is understanding the actual work that goes into making a project happen. And like for me, like I said, I learned that on my first job. How did you all kind of learn?
In my bedroom. So my style of learning has always been doing and trying. So when I was younger, I was always around computers and I was that nerdy kid. So I just used to say, oh, that's a cool logo. How can I recreate that? And I just used to play around and experiment. And that's literally how I've learned everything, is just by trial and error and having a stab at it myself. And for me, once I know the concept of how something's done, that allows me to kind of help the team. Not so much in writing some code, because actually my code is really bad. Don't ask me to write any CSS or tell me to float anything left, because it'll just break. But what it does help me to do is just give that empathy, and I just play around, and if I don't know, I just ask. You just ask stupid questions and just say, can you actually run through this with me? I know I'm being annoying, but can you just talk me through how it works so that I understand for next time? And 9 times out of 10, developers don't bite your head off. They actually sit there and support you and will say, oh, this is how it works, we do this, and it explains the process. So next time, that's easier for me.
Can we bring the mic over here? Do you still have a question? Cool.
It's tangential from what you were just talking about, but the inference I had from the fact we looked through all of your journeys and not just your current role is that those journeys, however meandering or not, are important. So when you're evaluating a candidate, how much weight do you place on, oh fantastic, they worked in retail or bar work or something like that, they'll have probably picked up resilience, or whatever it is you might infer from that meander. How much weight do you put on that, and how much do you maybe look at somebody who's gone on a straight junior dev, senior dev? Great. Do you go either way?
For me, it's all down to why. I've got people on my team now who during one-to-ones, when I first started managing them, they told me about they were, pre-Marks and Spencer, they were just a manager in a retail shop, and they managed people. To me, that was like a big flag for me. It's like, oh, this person's obviously got skills there. So it doesn't bother me. When it's on my CV, again, it doesn't, I'll be honest, the more I've done it, the more experience I have doing it, the less weight I put on how they've arrived in the room or on the phone screen or whatever. Sometimes it can be a massive benefit. So that being an example. So I just don't think it matters. I think I used to put a lot more weight on it and just realised from doing it lots and lots, talking to people, that everyone's lives, everyone's so different that you just can't tell. You can't tell. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think it's about passion. So if you come into the interview and you're passionate about the role and you can show that you've had some of that experience, or you're willing to learn, more importantly, I think that's more important to me. I remember one of my great bosses which I had, she employed a chef as a developer. This guy had no coding experience. He was brilliant. So it's actually looking at it a completely different way and being open to people and giving them opportunities.
Rachel, we had a question in the back here. Can you put your hand up?
So I'd like to continue this thread about selection of people to work in delivery roles, and this word passion keeps coming up again and again and again, and parallels like fire in the belly and so on. In the previous session we heard about introverts and extroverts, and I'm wondering if what we hear here is not a culture of extroversion hiring more extroverts. What place is there in delivery for the dispassionate, not disengaged, not disinterested, but dispassionate, but effective leader, manager, administrator? Is it just be passionate, passion, what a great day? Or is there something else that can do for that? I'm not especially passionate about most things. I'm passionate about my cats, I'm passionate about my partner. I'm not passionate about Gantt charts.
How dare you?
Is passion really such an overriding thing for delivery?
So I'm going to jump in here because I completely agree with you. I think the interview question is a good one, but I think what we're getting back to is how do you determine that the person is right for the job? And interviewing PMs is really difficult. There's no portfolio to look at. References are never really 100% honest because you're picking the best people that you've worked with who will give you a great recommendation. Your CV is good, but it doesn't tell you a story about you. So for me, and I will say, the situation that I was in when I was at Happy Cog, when I had to fire people who were my friends, one of those people is you. She is a person who was really amazing at her job. She was a great project manager. She was not passionate. She was not the person who, I was her boss. I was putting on a conference. I was running local meetups. She didn't come to any of that stuff. And I respected that about her because that was her personal choice. That was her personal decision. Did I think she missed out on networking opportunities and finding other opportunities or maybe finding a job quicker because she was laid off? Yes, but that's my personal opinion. I feel like the reason that she was hired was because when I asked difficult questions of her in the interview process, she was able to give me calm, thoughtful, really good answers. And when she interviewed with the team, the people she would be working with day to day, she was confident. Again, she was calm and pretty quiet. She's certainly an introvert. But to me, that's it. It's really trying to dig in to being a better interviewer, but also on the other side of that, being a good interview, being engaging. Just because you're saying you're not passionate doesn't mean that you really aren't. I think that you might find that you are in some ways, it just doesn't manifest itself the way it does in other people.
I completely agree. No, I know what you mean as well. So being sort of quite an introvert myself, I can appreciate. I've experienced it when it wasn't a thing that was talked about, and thus I realised the disadvantages, I guess you could say, in terms of progression. But I think as a community in general, myself as well, and now I'm a manager as well, I think it's really in the management of the people in terms of. I know my team, and I know the intricacies of them through the one-to-ones and whatnot. And I have people on my team who range from extrovert, passionate, right down to introvert. And I will defend them to my management. So if I have someone who doesn't necessarily appear to tick whatever boxes they're looking to tick, usually those boxes are created because they haven't. They don't realise that so many different characters exist. I was like that until I read books and stuff. I think we all are until we just expand a little bit. But if I'm questioned about a certain person, how they're quiet, when I want to put them forward maybe for to lead a project or something, I think it's always about championing that. So if you've got that knowledge, I think it's good for you to raise that and make people realise what the qualities are. And likewise, when it comes to not being passionate, exactly what Brett said in my experience, where again I've managed people in the past who. They don't want to do conferences. They don't even want to do objectives. They're very happy doing their job and they're good at it. And they go home and they've got lives. And you know what? I have to tell them that's okay. And I tell my bosses that's okay. It does. The reality, and whether it's fair or not, is that you miss out on things. But my job managing those people is just to explain. I don't mind you being you. It's more important you're comfortable being you. And I'm just going to let you know what I think the possible consequences of that be, and if they're okay with that too, I have no problem. But I appreciate that's not ubiquitous, but I think it's getting more and more lively.
Any other questions in the audience? Will we bring them over here?
Hi. So I've got a million observations and thoughts. I'm going to try and form an actual question, and I've already had 10 versions of the question. I think we'd all agree that the path to PM or delivery management is always quite varied, and that the transferable skills are gathered over time. How would we address getting people into the profession, especially women, younger, and kind of having a defined set of roles and career paths that actually are there and people know about them, so that when they're in school they're not just meandering their way, which is great, and you've all done fantastically well on your journeys, but surely having defined roles is where we need to be. The question is, have you got any thoughts on that? Have you got any ideas or suggestions of how we could tackle it?
So in our business, we have apprenticeships. So in my projects team, we've got 2 guys who it's their very first job, come straight out of school, straight out of college, into the business as project apprenticeships. And when I first joined the business, they said, oh, we've got 2 guys, just started, been there about a month. They've not even really done anything in a company, let alone project management. I was like, oh my God. But actually, these 2 guys are 2 of the strongest people in my team. And I think actually we underestimate some of the skills that young people have. And I think that's the first thing that businesses need to take into account, is that younger people are more resilient than what they used to be. They've got a lot more emotional intelligence than what I feel I had when I was their age. And we just have to coach them through it. They are getting their formal training in terms of they're doing APM exams and they will complete a 2-year apprenticeship programme. But it's just getting them involved, I think, getting them observing, getting them engaged. And we'll always continue to take apprenticeships on and build these young people up. In other areas of the business where not so much project management, but in the development teams, we've got people who joined 5 years ago in his apprenticeship who are now leading technical teams. And it's just making sure those opportunities are there and just getting them involved, I think, is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I've had some experience where we've actually gone into schools. So when the schools have actually said, oh, we're having a parents' careers day, come in and speak to the children. So I went and I think my daughter was about 8 at that time, to talk about project management to this group of children. I'm no teacher, so it wasn't a great place for you to be in the first place. But the couple of things I did take away was the kids really didn't understand it at that age. So I tried to give them an example that, if you're organising a birthday party, you're a project manager. So I was now a party organiser, as far as those kids were concerned. Just like all of you have organised yourselves to get here, everybody in this room is a project manager, and I think it's just kind of turning those buttons to get those skills. I don't know what the answer is to get them at that age, because I don't think they quite understand what project management is.
So one of the things that's gotten me excited over the past few years is coming to this conference and seeing a whole row of university students in a digital program at a digital PM conference. I don't think they're here today, are they? No, Sam and I actually went and did a workshop a few years ago at the university with those students. I feel almost as if it's partly my responsibility to do those kinds of things, and I do make the time to do that. So I'll take on pro bono coaching projects with people. I will say, interestingly, the event that I run in the States skews heavily female rather than male. So I think digital, project management in digital is more female weighted. I don't know what that means at all, it's just kind of an observation. But I do think, it's about kind of making opportunities for other people and taking the opportunity of people like us to reach out and help as much as we can. I don't know any other formal way other than like getting out there and talking about it and making it accessible. I totally agree with you. And my book is all about how project management is an everyday life kind of thing, and it's a skill that anyone should have no matter what. So, any other questions in the audience? If you have your hand up, yell out. Yeah, right here on the end.
So what's your view on how important is getting a university degree for people, or having a university degree when you're or looking for new people? When you get CVs in, some may or may not have degrees on. Some role profiles state that degrees are minimum criteria. What's your view on that?
It's a tricky question because I've seen people answer it both ways, and my personal take on it is having a degree doesn't mean much other than assuming you got an okay grade, you probably got the ability to learn. I don't really focus on what that degree is. I mean, the evidence here, a lot of people here, I'm sure in this room as well, have got random things that didn't really. So it does show an ability to learn, but that doesn't mean someone who hasn't got one doesn't have that. a bit of a cop-out answer, but the truth is, in the interview process, that's when you're really trying to find out what that person is really like. I mean, personally, I think the days are gone, at least when I'm involved in hiring, of looking at buzzwords. If anything, there can be too many. I can actually think poorly of a CV if there's too many buzzwords in there. I want to see a real person who, is described as spent time on their CV, thought about it. That means more to me than any degree. I will turn down for a phone screen people with degrees and masters, irrelevant, because it just dare I say smells wrong. And I'll much prefer to take someone who just seems like they've got really good experience. They seem like a smart person. Let's have a chat with them and find out. That's my take.
Yeah, I've been interviewing a lot recently, and I couldn't tell you if the people that I've seen the CVs of and interviewed had a degree or not, because it just wasn't what I was looking at on the CV. I was looking at their more recent roles, I was looking at types of work they had, sort of how they came across on that, and then sort of if they seem to have the sort of right experience, then I get them in for interview and talk to them, and then it becomes about the sort of personal skills and how they communicate, how they problem solve. But yeah, I couldn't even tell you if they had a degree or not, so it's really not important to me.
I have a question. I would like to kind of dig into the more difficult part of the role, whatever your role is. I think, delivery in and of itself, project management is stressful, as Stephen mentioned earlier. And I'm curious to know for all of you, what are the things that you really dislike or wish that you could change about your roles? And are those things that, if you can't change them, might drive you in a different direction?
Gantt charts. Get rid of them.
Well, you are an agile coach, so.
Joking aside, I mean, I'm Prince 2 qualified. I hate Gantt charts. When I discovered Scrum, I was like, goodbye Gantt charts. I have not used a Gantt chart in years. So, obviously the audience here, you must be in different environments to what I'm working in at the moment, so maybe it's more applicable to you, but yeah, if you can get rid of a Gantt chart, do it.
Do not agree. I don't think the tool that you use really should impact your career path.
What tool do you think they should?
No, I'm not endorsing any kind of tool. To be completely honest, this is where the panel should be, right? Like this little argument. No, I don't see how the tool that you're using or the process that you're using would drive you in a completely different direction in your career. I think, sure, you can do more kind of traditional project management, you can be more agile, whatever, right? To me, the thing that drove me out of an agency job was clients and the stress that the clients put on me and how much I hated them. And I didn't want to be that person, It had nothing to do with a plan or a Gantt chart. Things change, right? Gantt charts, you're going to put one together, you're going to change it 500 times before the project ends. Same thing goes with Agile. Things change all the time, that's what you expect. Different sets of expectations. For me, the real thing there is people and managing those people and having to deal with all of their emotions and absorbing everything. And that to me is what makes it difficult.
I disagree with that.
You do?
No, I think it depends on the person. So if a person is being forced to use Gantt charts, if we're using this as the example, it might be symptomatic of bigger problems around their management, around the agency. So it could be that Gantt charts drive somebody to leave.
Sure.
Yeah, so a little disagreement, but.
That's
I really don't care.
Delivery days. I think a completely different angle is one thing that I used to find difficult was that in our role, it always feels like you're under the hammer in terms of deadlines, and it's often because of things that you had no control of way further up in whatever lifestyle you're using, and yet there you are now. I have a kind of a split feeling about that, because on one hand, that's our job. The only thing I think I would like to change is, and I would encourage everyone here to do, everyone who's in delivery will experience that, right? You're at the end of the line in some way, from a sale to delivery point of view. But I think too many people, including myself in the past, would just bitch and moan about that amongst my peers, to whoever, and I wasn't thinking about how can I improve that. So it's really about getting the people who are causing those potential issues. Some of them don't even realise they're doing it. Some of them don't care, but some of them actually don't realise. If you take them, I saw my job once I became a little bit more experienced and senior to kind of move away from necessarily the day-to-day hands-on stuff and work more at trying to improve those areas. So I would try and explain to the salespeople why that method of selling or that way of doing it is causing problems. Maybe 3-6 months later, and explaining the pain and just exposing them a bit to our world in the hope that they just take some small percentage of that on board and perhaps adapt, and likewise work with them too, because it's not always clear. You have an impression of something. Because sales, one thing I thought was just completely different to what it actually was when I got involved. I started to understand why things were being sold the way they were at short notice for high prices. But it took me to get involved myself to do that.
I think with situations like that as well, people blow stuff out of proportion and take things completely out of context. So your project might be going into amber because of a small little issue, so you raise it as amber. But especially if you're an agency, it's like the end of the world. It's a massive disaster. It's not. It's actually not going to impact anything. And it's about kind of what I used to find really difficult being purely agency was trying to navigate the political scene. And that's the thing that over time with some of my roles that I really started to resent or hate, is trying to manage that. Well, I can't really say this because I know someone's going to kick off about it over here and it's not actually an issue, and like trying to manage all the different personalities all of the time. And if you're not in an open environment, an open culture where it's like, yeah, you've raised it as an issue, but I know you're on it, that's okay. That's where I kind of start hating agencies in some respects.
Yeah, I'm sort of similar. I think one of the main reasons I went freelance wasn't for the money or anything like that. You don't get paid if you're sick or if you go on holiday. Was mostly because of the internal politics thing, and I've worked in agencies for a long, long time, and there's a lot of internal politics that goes on, and it can be really hard to navigate, can be really stressful, and it can just take over your day-to-day working life, which just takes you away from actually what you enjoy doing, which is probably managing projects or sort of building something that's great. And I got to that point where I was just really sick of internal politics, and I felt like going freelance would actually help remove me from that, which hasn't worked brilliantly. It's worked okay. I can kind of take myself out of that situation, but I've kind of done some long-term freelancing where you start to get involved in the internal politics again. So it is making me consider at this point now whether I want to continue in agencies or maybe try a client-side role. So I'm kind of starting to become a bit more two minds about that. So.
I completely agree. So even I had a similar path into freelance, but more or less consulting, less kind of project management. And I loved being an outsider looking in and kind of diagnosing their problems, because I could draw on my experience and help guide them in the right direction. But just like any other project, they don't always take the direction, and things don't go the way that you plan. I think what drew me back into the role that I'm in now was the desire to explore what it looked like in a product-focused company. And it's not what I expected at all. It's 100% remote. It's really great. I love it. It took me some time to adapt because I'm not a project manager now. So when I do feel like there are issues with process or communications, I'm biting my tongue so hard that I could bite it off. But there are times where I do speak up and I help and make things better. And I think that's how the rest of my career path will be. Like, I think I'll always be a project manager, in that I'm looking for issues and I like a good challenge, and I like to solve a good challenge and be helpful. So. Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up over here?
It's kind of expanding what you've been talking about. So kind of looking at the strengths and weaknesses or stresses and worries about working at a small agency, sort of bigger corporations, working within a single business like some of you guys are now. Just kind of weighing up on what you've already said, but what you kind of learn, all the main worries, strengths, weaknesses of kind of working in each individual sectors. Because you're still a delivery project manager, but your role and what you do obviously changes depending on the frequency in what you work on?
I think one of there's many differences, right? So I was someone who said I'd never work in an office, then I'd never work in a big company, and now I'm at a big company. So I've kind of seen quite a few different environments. I think one of the biggest differences for me at small companies, I think irrelevantly, but certainly as a PM, chances are you're a PM plus 5 other roles, as is many people. Other people are doing multiple roles. So it's if it's a small company, there's cash flow to think about. When you're Marks and Spencer, it's not necessarily it's not something that affects every individual every day. It's just a very different thing. So if you're looking to get into delivery, and you haven't got much experience, I think a small company is the hardest, but it's the most beneficial. It's certainly where I learned. I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now without going to a small company. Without starting at a small company. When I worked at small companies and people interviewed or joined sometimes from larger companies, very rarely did it work out. Going the other way, it's always the person's choice if it works out, because they can deal with anything. It's a case of if they want to. I think when you're at a larger company, you do get one of the upsides is you get the ability to specialise and not worry about so many different things. The downside of that though is you're actually getting quite narrow in your career then. It is pros and cons, but I think there's stark differences. But I think small is where you learn most in the shortest time.
I actually think the stresses and strains of being a PM or delivery lead pretty much are similar across any type of organisation, to be honest. You will find there are differences, but a lot of the kind of core sort of problems you have sort of day to day maybe are very similar, sort of from what I've experienced from working at both small and large. And just my advice would be that just to try and work at sort of on different experiences. So I'm not saying just move around sort of continuously, and you could be at a certain company for a long time, but you are getting different challenges and you experience different projects, different types of clients maybe. I wasn't finding that where I was at certain points, so I sort of moved on quite regularly every at least 3 years, and that really helped me to basically build my experience, work on very different things. So that would be my advice.
Great, well, we're actually over time, and that's my fault. Sorry about that. So let's take thank you all first. Thank you. I'm sure we're all willing to hang out if anybody has any additional questions for us, but let's take a quick break, coffee break out in the lobby, and we'll be back here at 5 after for our next talk. Thank you.